Today's guest is Kathleen Saxton.
If you had a very critical parent, you've never felt that you could actually say, do you know what, you terrorised me as a child, or you made me feel so frightened as a child, or I never felt I could stand up to you, and I'm going to stand up to you now, and I'm going to tell you what I really think about you.
What does narcissistic parenting look like? Hi everyone, welcome back to On The Mend. Now this is the podcast where we look back at life's toughest moments to figure out how to move forward. I watched today's guest on This Morning, probably a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and I was blown away. Kathleen, thank you so much for being here.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Well, I mean, we've all been very excited you're coming on because we've been kind of swapping videos of you and kind of getting very excited because I think everyone I speak to about this subject, about the subject of narcissism, like has a story or has something.
Yes.
And it's like one of those things very similar to addiction. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know there's a crossover between narcissism and addiction, which I'm going to talk to you about later on, but I think everyone knows someone who's had a problem with addiction, and everyone seems to know someone who's had a problem with narcissism or knows a narcissist.
Completely. And it's very misunderstood. But once we begin to understand it, you then can spot it a lot quicker. And obviously there's lots of ways of then learning to cope with what that looks like and how you can overcome and be with people that have either the traits or the full disorder.
Can you break down exactly what narcissism means?
So it is a classified personality disorder. It's listed in the DSM-5. It sits alongside other personality disorders like borderline, etc. So it is diagnosable, but like most things, it sits on a spectrum. So we've got narcissistic traits, narcissistic personality, and then narcissistic personality disorder. Right. And I would wager the reason why we're all so very interested in it right now is that we all wonder whether or not we might have the odd trait within ourselves. And I think most of us do have the odd narcissistic trait or tendency under certain amounts of pressure. But that's not the same as someone who's actually fully disordered. And they are the ones that can cause so much difficulty for us, whether they're our parent, our boss, our partner, even sadly our child. It can be a situation whereby you'll know something about that. And so how we really look at diagnosing it, there are 9 diagnostic criteria for narcissism. And we would be looking as a clinician at 5 that are consistently showing up. Right. So we can all be a little bit selfish now and again, but if there's certain ones that are showing up all the time. So lots of different things. Number 1, complete lack of empathy for you. So if something's happening in your life, they are just not interested at all in what's going on. They would never follow back up and say, how is your mum, your brother, your dog, whatever it may be. They might only do that for performative empathy. So the smart ones have figured out what they're meant to say to you and they might say it once, but they would never follow up.
Yeah.
So watch for performance. We see lots of this in leadership right now. Lots of leaders have become this sort of authentic leader. So they sort of pretend they're very concerned about the people that work for them, but it's very short-lived and you can kind of see that. A real sense of entitlement. So they would expect different and special behaviour all the time. So they wouldn't sit in a queue. You know, they would expect to be treated differently in restaurants. They'd be expecting to get VIP tickets to your gigs and your new show. All sorts of things they would be expecting and would be relatively enraged if they didn't get that. So you'd notice quite quickly the mask of charm falls off if they don't get what they're expecting, as a really good example. Incredibly selfish, so everything will be self-serving. They will be very interested in what is this going to do for me rather than what's it going to do for us or for you. So that would be really, again, really something you would notice very, very quickly. Very, very difficult times with criticism. So any kind of feedback, even if it's well meant, and you're saying to someone, please, would you mind doing that because it was really hurtful when you did this before, they'll be enraged that you've dared to criticise them. That's a really big issue for them. So they would be the sort of top 4 of the sort of the 9 that you would look for that I would see most pervasively in someone that's got the disorder.
The thing is that this is what I find so fascinating because sometimes I'm like, I'm a bit of a bad day and become a bit of an arsehole. Do you know what I mean? Like, or I'm a bit tired, or I'm driving, that can bring out the worst in me. You know, like all these things. I'm like, I was listening to the things, I was like, well, sometimes I have a little bit of that. Sometimes I'm a little bit like that. Am I a fucking narcissist? You know, it was very scary for me. I'm happy to hear that you can have these little traits every now and again and not be a full-blown narcissist.
And that's different, that's fine. And the other big misunderstanding, of course, is that I think we all always thought that narcissism was one size fits all, that we're talking about grandiose narcissism. So those that are showing off, bombastic, take all the oxygen in a room, all of that sort of stuff. And we know those types relatively well now. I think we almost find them slightly comedic. It's the covert types, the undercover types that are difficult. Maybe we'll come on to that. And and malignant types as well. So that's what I'm trying to make sure we understand more is there are different flavours and it presents itself in different ways, and we need to understand that to protect ourselves.
Okay, well, I want to get into that straight away because I find that so fascinating. So what is a covert narcissist?
So a narcissist, people always think are people that are full of themselves and have got big egos. It's the complete opposite. They have got a very shattered sense of self. They're very hollow inside, quite empty inside. And so in a very early age, they formed what we call a sort of defensive mask. And that mask is the person that we get to meet. So for someone that's grandiose, it would be charming and overt and over the top and very loud, etc. But that's their defense mechanism for the emptiness that they actually feel inside.
Right.
But narcissistic supply for them is lots of accolades, lots of praise, being noticed, being told that you're amazing and special. And they will hunger for that. They will long for that in a very special way. Coverts go the other way round. So they also need the supply, but they get it via pity and victimhood.
Right.
So these people
this
will always have
so many alarms for me.
They'll have a sad story, a difficult story. They've overcome something and you think so well of them because of it. They've been put in difficult positions and overcome it. So you're very drawn into them and their stories. But often they'll be the eternal victim. It was always them that the thing happened to.
Yeah.
And so therefore people pay them attention for different reasons, which is that they're worrying about them. They're trying to put something right for them. They're trying to fix them. You'll be drawn in by that. And the third type we talk about is malignant. So we talk about the dark triad. That's the other thing. Dark triad in psychopathy. We talk about psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. They are the three axes of the dark triad. So as a therapist, if someone comes to me and I'm starting to get a bit of a feel for any of those things, I'm wondering if I'm dealing with the dark triad. And if people are explaining difficulties to me, if they come to me with someone that they're worrying about, I'll be looking for that. So malignant narcissists are those that probably have more psychopathy and almost sort of a sadistic sense of what they're doing with the narcissism.
Is this something that you can inherit? Like, can you become a narcissist, or are you always been a narcissist?
Yeah. So it's two schools of thought, not enough research yet been done because it was a sort of unattractive sort of thing to research, but there's more coming through.
Yeah.
So first of all, we thought it was genetic. We thought that was absolutely where it was coming from initially. But they did a genetic twin study in 2022, and they found that with identical twins, one of them went on to develop it and the other one didn't.
Right.
So that has really kind of upturned the apple cart, regards whether or not it's genetic.
Yeah.
Where I see genes playing in some form is if there's a narcissistic parent, there are obviously sometimes multiple children.
Yeah.
And I talk in the book about different types of children. And the golden child is the child who the narcissistic parent will say is the best thing that ever happened. They're the most academic, they're the most beautiful, most accomplished, the funniest. They tend to be the child that the narcissist lives their life through their lens of. And what happens is, as they're growing up, the red carpet is rolled out for this child. They're told that they are magnificent in everything. My experience of this has been things like a father who went to the daughter's ballet school and insisted she was given a bigger part in the show because she was so brilliant. That's the sort of behaviour. This poor child, having what they think is a magnificent childhood because everything's easy and gorgeous for them, leaves home, might go to university, might go and live with mates in London or wherever they might live, and suddenly people don't agree with them all the time. Suddenly people say, actually, I don't like the way that you do that or the way that you treat me. And it's the first time that child has heard any kind of negativity or criticism. And then they may have inherited that sort of narcissistic, they've learnt it basically by watching it and living in it rather than it genetically being actually in their bones. So we have to wonder sometimes about the fact that they are being taught to be this way in some form.
Wow. I mean, there's so many different levels of it as well. Like, so, because one of my questions was going to be, can you cure it?
At the moment, narcissistic personality disorder is the only mental health condition that we don't think there's either a therapeutic or a medical cure. Nothing.
Wow.
Now, if you've got traits and if you've got personality, we think dialectic, DBT therapy can approach it. We feel that coming to therapy in some form and doing different work groups with different groups of people that have that level of personality can help moderate your behaviour to some degree. But if you have the disorder, if you're diagnosed with the disorder, currently there is no cure.
What does narcissistic parenting look like?
Okay, so this will look like the parent utilising the child for their benefit. And if we think in therapeutic terms, we have a thing called object relations, how we relate. And often for the parent, other people, including their children, are objects for them to utilise in some way, which is a terrible thing to think about or to believe. So that child is utilised in different ways. So if they're the golden child, they are there to make them look good. So my child has got into Oxford. Aren't I an amazing parent that they did that? Never mind the child. Aren't I amazing that my child got into Oxford? The scapegoat child is the child that carries all the ills of that parent. So if the parent is selfish, if they're bad-tempered, if they are a fussy eater, if they had a naughty side or illegal side when they were younger, all of that gets projected onto that child. They will carry all the traits that the narcissistic parent does not want to carry for themselves.
Wow.
So this poor kid from a very early age will believe that this is all true about them, and after a period of time will begin to act into those traits.
Right.
That's what happens. We say for children of narcissists, they don't stop loving the parent, they stop loving themselves. That's what happens. So it's absolutely tragic. And I have lots of scapegoat kids coming to me. We have then the lost child. So this is the child that notices being in the spotlight with my narcissistic parent is pretty awful because they're all over me like a rash. I don't want to be the scapegoat child because that's a living hell. So I'll become the lost child. I'll just escape to my bedroom. I'll play my computer games. I'll do whatever I'm doing, but I just won't really engage with the family that much, and certainly not my narcissistic parent. But what happens in later life is they then struggle to connect in relationships because they've just learned to shut down.
Yeah. They've learned when I go there, it causes more pain. So I'm going to separate from that.
Of course. Yeah. So you'll see the parent living out their life through these children. You will see them utilising them to make themselves look good. You will see them also emotionally leaning on these children. So the children will be there to emotionally bolster and hold this parent up. You see it loads in single parent families, sadly, but it can happen in married couples or partnered couples as well. But they will often go to the child and say, you'll never guess what mum or dad has done, the other partner. You'll never guess what's going on. They'll tell you about their work, their bosses. They'll tell you about their money situation. They'll talk about their romantic situations, often to a child of 8, 9, 10.
Oh my God.
So these children are holding all of this emotional responsibility or worry for that parent. So you'll often see quasi-parenting, quasi-partnering. So in a single-parent family, for example, opposite-sex child could become the quasi-partner.
What does quasi mean? Sorry.
So let's say it's a single mum and she's narcissistic. She may make her eldest son her kind of partner. She will lean on him in all ways other than physical. She will lean on him to be her right-hand guy.
Right.
And for that child, initially, he may feel, I'm really special and I'm able to do all these wonderful things. I'm a grown-up. I get treated like a grown-up. But actually, we are stealing that childhood from that, that individual. Yeah. And so I call it psychological theft. We are stealing the sense of self of that child because they grow up to not really know what they think and what they feel. Yeah. They grow up to just inherit what they've been told to feel.
It's a lot to take on at such an early age.
It's unbelievable.
It's so much.
It's unbelievable. And I know we talk about, I sit on the board of NSPCC very proudly. I work with Childline, and we talk a lot about, of course, physical abuse, sexual abuse, which is absolutely unbelievably heinous. But emotional, psychological abuse, I really think we need to start taking as seriously as we do the others because they have very long-lasting effects. And the last thing I'd mention is also what we call triangulation. It goes on a lot in these relationships, whatever flavour of narcissism. So the narcissist, in needing to keep this supply coming, they will need to make sure they've got some people close to them that will also defend them. And so they will bring someone in very closely who will also do their bidding for them. We call them flying monkeys sometimes, like the Wizard of Oz. So they will stand up for the narcissist. So in a family, for example, let's say the narcissist is a mother. Mm-hmm. And she will be trying to ostracize the father. She may bring the children in and gang them up on the father. So she's triangulated him out and held the children in. can happen either sex parent, but the triangulation goes on. I see it with bosses where they'll kind of have a right-hander that will defend them. You see it in partnerships also. So again, you'll notice they'll have a couple of sort of lieutenants, if you like, that are either side of them or around them, defending their honour, making bids for them, telling stories for them, and oscillating and isolating anybody out who might be starting to say, I think I'm seeing trouble here. I think I'm seeing the mask edge of this narcissist. The minute someone starts picking at that mask edge, they're going to do whatever they can to literally annihilate you.
I mean, I've seen this in friends of mine that have split with their partners. I've seen this exact thing happen. I'm like, from an amazing relationship with their kids to their kids literally teaming up against them. You know, like, I've seen that happen. It's terrifying to watch.
We've probably seen there's been a lot of talk in the world at the minute about parental alienation. It's obviously very strong at the moment, particularly against dads, actually, but it can be against mums, where the children start saying, I don't want to go and see the other parent. And we often, as therapeutic practitioners, I'm starting to wonder whether the main parent has got narcissistic traits, and whether or not he or she has persuaded the children through triangulation that actually there's something wrong with the other parent. So parental alienation does so much damage to these children. It splits them psychologically. All children really need both parents somewhere in their orbit, as long as there's not actual abuse going on. And we're seeing that this alienating of children is just really rising at the moment, and we're working so hard to try and make sure the courts begin to understand what they're dealing with, because it's heartbreaking if you are the parent that we call is in the rejected position. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
Can we just define some differences for me? Because tough parenting is a really hard thing for me to navigate. Right? Because sometimes when my kids, not so much now, I think now the older two are a bit older. Like I've got a daughter of 16, a boy of 14, and a girl of 9. But when they were little, sometimes I had to, for instance, I'd make them sit on the step. You know, I was like, this is like, and it was the worst thing in the world for them to sit on the step for like 20 minutes. You know, and I was like, wait a second, I wouldn't make anyone else sit on a step. You know, like obviously this is a parenting choice, you know, but like I was told to do it and it kind of worked. You know, and I was like, man, is this a form of that? Do you mean like, is this a power move? I was like, oh. Yeah,
it's so difficult, isn't it? Because we've got one end sort of permissive parenting where we're allowing everything, thinking that's the modern way of doing it. And we've got others that's obviously super strict in some form. I'm guessing naughty steps somewhere in the middle. I think we have to start as a parent, and I'm a parent too, we have to start with what is our intent? What is our actual intent? And if we're truly looking at helping the child begin to understand boundaries, and healthy ways of managing our emotions, and we're mirroring well to our children. Mirroring is really important, which we can talk about. Then my view is that maybe the naughty step in an instance is not necessarily a bad thing, but we've got to come back to what's going on. Are we doing it for us, or are we doing it to actually help our children understand the boundaries by which we all have to learn to live in some form?
Life with my family, work and everything else can get a bit chaotic, but staying on top of my health is one thing I know that I can control. For me, it's about keeping it simple and consistent. That's where Vitals by Heights comes in. When I look at my diary, it's packed, right? With kids, the podcast, shows, everything else. It's easy to let my health slip down the priority list. But I've learned that staying consistent with the basics, like my daily health routine, keeps me going through the chaos. 2 small capsules each morning give me everything I need to stay energized, focused, and on top of my game. No complicated routines, no hassle. I need simplicity. And Vitals takes the guesswork out of maintaining my energy and performance. Whether heading for a full day's worth of On The Mend records or chasing after the kids, I know I've got the right fuel to keep up. If you want to make health simple and consistent like I have, click the link in our description and use code OTM20 to get 20% off your first month.
Because my view of permissive parenting is, again, the children come out into the real world and it's a bit of a rude awakening when they find out their boss is telling them if you're not in on time, you're going to get sacked. I mean, that's the reality. So there's something around that. But by the same token, so mirroring's important. We understand this so well from research that's been done around helping our children understand what they're feeling. So even if they're enraged with us because we've taken something away from them or we've sent them to bed or whatever we've done, being able to say to them, you seem really angry or you seem really sad or you seem really irritated. Talk to me about what's happening for you. What are you really feeling? Sitting with the feeling. We call it sitting in the fire. Can you sit in the discomfort, whatever anyone else is feeling, rather than try and fix it or heal it? Can you sit with it and say, tell me tell me more about what this is. So for a child, it's saying, I accept all of your feelings, even if you're rageful at me, I'm accepting it, I'm interested in why. A narcissistic parent wouldn't be in the vaguest interested why. All they'd want to do is shut you down and make sure that you started doing what they wanted you to do. Right. That's different. So that's where the intent comes in. What's your intent?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's so fascinating because you just described me and my wife in this situation. Like, Emma's so good at just allowing the feeling and kind of like what's going on for you, and I'm like trying to fix something.
Yeah, of course.
I'm always trying to kind of fix it.
We all want to fix and make things better for our kids, right? We're good human beings. But sometimes, and again, we find this in the therapeutic world, if we try and move to fix someone too quickly, we're also taking away their agency to figure it out themselves.
If you're enjoying this episode, hit follow. It really helps us more than you can possibly imagine. Now, back to the episode.
You're so right, because sometimes I needed to feel those feelings, like that's been important for me to feel those feelings, I've kind of grown from that experience. Yeah. So, I mean, I always knew she was right, but I was just like, it was uncomfortable for me to be around. I was like, can I do anything? I'm going to let you do that. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a really interesting one, but I'm very glad to hear that you can, put boundaries within parenting that aren't narcissistic, so it's okay.
I think boundaries are really important for children. They really are.
I think so. And I look at my kids now. I'm very proud of them. So I'm gonna it's I don't do too much damage. Hopefully, I mean, I did read that We Fuck 'Em Up book. So
I love that book. Oliver James, great book. I coached him yesterday.
Did you really?
Amazing. Yeah,
I read that book and I was like, oh dear.
Guy.
Well,
I know, but we all have that. It's trigger regression. We all behave in those ways, don't we? In some form. But again, I think that there's something for our children to. Again, we're modelling to them all the time. Their little eyes are watching us all the time. And when I was training as a therapist many, many years ago, my kids are now, they're 29, 27. And I didn't train until they were in their early teens. And I remember being in the lectures and listening to some of this stuff and thinking, well, that ship has sailed and I've completely got that wrong. I really messed that up. Yeah. But we've always got time to keep trying to get it right. Even as they get older, we've always got time to try and get it right. And to apologise. To apologise sometimes to our children for things that we didn't realise we were getting wrong at the time. We say sorry seems to be the hardest word, but actually it is the most healing word as well.
You've kind of explained it, but what happens to a child when they grow up in this kind of environment? Mm-hmm. Because obviously if they've got a narcissistic parent, can that lead to them kind of gravitating towards narcissism later in life?
Yeah.
Do they find it's something which appeals to them?
Yeah, sadly so. So there's two things to think about. We've got the lovely John Bowlby's theory about attachment theory, but also the sense of Winnicott's work on true self, full self, adapted self. So if we start with attachment theory, we are one of four types. We're anxious, we're avoidant, we're disorganised, or we're secure. We all want to be secure. I'm anxious attached, as an example. When we've lived with a narcissistic parent whose moods are up and down, that we're trying to just about stay the right side of their behaviour all the time, because when they blow, when they're punishing towards us, when they're disregarding towards us, when they're critical towards us, it really wounds us as children. So we learn to try and figure out, how am I going to attach safely to my caregiver? Because they're the only caregivers that we have at the time, right? So first of all, figuring out, if I become more avoidant of type, it means that I can just about stay on the safety line of not being so attached and enmeshed with my parent, but I'm going to become quite avoidant in relationships. So what happens to that when I become an adult? If I'm an anxious attached, I'm trying to please you and pacify you and keep on the right side of you all the time. So when I get into a relationship, I'm going to be anxious about being hypervigilant to reading your mood and how you are with me in a relationship. So already we've got some trouble brewing on attachment styles, right? And disorganised attachment, which is rarer, which is the person that should be loving and caring for you and maybe does sometimes, is also the one that is punishing you. Intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's awful. You spend a lot of your time as a kid trying to get back onto the good side of mum or dad. And this will play out in your relationships. So you've got that as attachment. You've then got what we look at the framework of true self, full self, adapted self. So in that avoidant mix, you've then probably decided that I cannot just be my true self because it's not really acceptable to that parent. So I will adapt myself. so that I am more agreeable to you and what you're wanting from me. You want me to be a great gymnast because you were, I'll be really good at gymnastics. You wanted to be a barrister, but you didn't make it. Well, then I'll become a barrister as I get older to please my narcissistic parent. So you've completely abandoned yourself.
Yeah.
You've adapted, you've become a false self at times as well. So you don't really know who you are. And then we obviously often see uncomfortableness as familiar. If our upbringing was quite uncomfortable and difficult, that's really familiar to us.
Yeah.
So someone comes along that's well adjusted and offers us a loving relationship, we probably think they're quite boring, maybe a bit weird. But someone who comes along who's in and out, hot and cold, approving, disapproving, this is really familiar to us.
Yeah.
We think maybe this could be it. This could be the one for me. We've completely unconsciously repeated an old pattern of what happened with our narcissistic parent.
Why do you think these wounds sometimes show up later in life?
So the first thing is you meet your partner's parents and realise, these people seem really nice and normal, and you begin to realise the context by which you grew up in. Because you're normal. You have no idea that there's something quite weird about that.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And then you meet someone else's parents and you're like, oh, this is a quite interesting delta between these two things.
Yeah.
The second thing is that you might get married and have a great relationship and realise that actually we're looking forward to having our own children. You then might go on to have children and realise I would never treat my children the way that maybe my narcissistic parent would have treated me.
Yeah.
So we can't do it for ourselves because we're sort of enmeshed in this false self that we've created. When we have these pure souls of our own children coming into the world, we suddenly realise the things that we would never, ever impose on them.
Yeah.
And suddenly we begin to wonder, was something going on over here with my parent? I'm beginning to wonder. So we have some of that. We might come to therapy for something else. You know, I know that you're a big fan of therapy. People often come with a crisis point, a crunch point about something. But I would say more than half the time, after a few months of us working through whatever that is, the real stuff starts to come up.
Yeah.
And often it's something to do with parenting that comes in some form.
And what are those kind of typical patterns you see in adults who grow up with a narcissistic parent?
Yeah. So enmeshment and engulfment are really common. So I'll see this a bit more with narcissistic mothers and daughters, could be mothers and sons, but I do actually see it a bit more in the female form. I think some of this is our upbringing of how we think mothers should be, nurturing, soft, warm, you know, the classic kind of gender stereotype, if you like, of mothers. And what they found was that those mothers might have been very like that to start with. They then became very engulfing. So the minute I hear someone saying, my mum is my best friend, or a mother saying, my daughter's my very best friend, starts to worry me. If your mother won't do anything without you, if you've always got to, the minute they call you, you've got to rush round there. If you might be married yourself and your mum rings you 5 times a day for a chat, slightly concerned at that point. Now, mum might be lonely because something's happened, but the chances are there's something going on. They want to make big decisions about your life for you, even though you might be happily married and grown up. It could be in your 40s or 50s, but the parent is still trying to guide your decisions and have a voice in it. You'll see it on birthdays, at Christmas, maybe your wedding day, maybe the day your kid was born. That parent will make it all about them. All the attention will get switched back over to them. There'll be a drama the night before your wedding that will be all about the mother-in-law, because it's got to be about the mother-in-law. Yeah. And if it's your birthday, you know, the mother-in-law will have a fall the day before, or she'll be allergic to the peanuts, or there'll be something where all the attention somehow goes across. Grandiose, it'll be something exciting. Covert, it'll be something to do with the victim, but you'll watch it happen. So engulfment, enmeshment, very common things that you'll start to see with the parents, or the other way round, hypercritical. Nothing is good enough. You didn't do well enough. They'll be telling all your friends and family still how dreadful you were at maths, what a naughty kid you were. They're very surprised you've done very well because you weren't like that when you were a child. So lots and lots of chipping away, criticism will come the other end. So engulfment, enmeshment, or hypercriticism will be the two ends of the spectrum. There's lots of things in the middle.
Why is it that so many of us become overgivers or fixers, or people who feel never enough. Like, so loads of anyone who's gone through this kind of like narcissistic parenting,
Yeah.
is that just part and parcel of it?
The reason it's part and parcel is, don't forget, you've had your own self eroded. You've got this psychological theft. You don't really know who you are, so that breeds a sense of insecurity within yourself. So your lack of confidence, and whether they've chipped away at you by saying, "Are you sure you're able to do that? You know, mummy will be here if you need me." So again, taking away your agency, or they've said, "You're never going to achieve that. I mean, what makes you think you're going to do that?" Chipping away. So it's like the frog in the pot analogy, that slowly the water's being turned up and then you're boiled, you know. So there's something about, it's all of these little and often comments towards you, comments about you, that you begin to believe as a child, as a teenager. And that's why often as we get to adulthood, we don't really know who we are. We haven't got really strong self-confidence. And so what we decide is, I'm only good enough when I'm helpful enough.
Yeah.
If I'm good at something for someone else, if I can be helpful towards you, if I can do a little bit more for you, maybe I can be the giver, the achiever. I can be the person who is always the one that goes and gets the coffees for the team. I found my place to be helpful. I wouldn't believe that I could ever be the leader of anything, but I could be the number two. I could be the helper. Often it's because our self-esteem is just not strong enough. We've not had our self-esteem developed enough.
Yeah.
So when we talk about being able to mirror people's emotions, even when they're difficult emotions, it's about teaching a child, you're allowed to feel like that, but understand why you do. We're growing the human to really like and believe in themselves.
Yeah.
When we chip away for different reasons, we're literally annihilating that true self within us. So we become quite hollow ourselves in the end.
Yeah.
And that's why we overgive, because we don't believe that we are good enough just as we are.
Yeah.
Just by turning up, we're good enough.
Right, okay. I wanted to break down a few words, which I hear a
Okay.
lot. The first one we've got here is emotional withdrawal.
Oh, this is a classic in narcissistic relationships, particularly parents, but can be partners. So if they utilise their love and attention towards you as a parent when you do what they want you to do, they will absolutely give you their emotion, their attention. You will be in their spotlight and their sunshine. The minute you either do something or say something they don't like, particularly about them, the cold wind will blow. That emotional withdrawal will come so fast. It'll be like a Jekyll and Hyde. So it's 1 minute you were absolutely the apple of their eye, and over dinner you asked them a question or you said something about their behaviour that they didn't like, you are out. Gone for weeks on end, maybe silent treatment, complete emotional withdrawal. You will really feel that you've been isolated out of that family. So it's a very common trait if you're in a partnership with someone, a romantic partnership as well, where maybe you've said, listen, you've not taken me out on a date for 4 weeks and I really miss you and I feel that you're not really there for me. Emotional withdrawal. They'll put the phone down, they'll walk out, they'll say, you're too much for me, you're too much, I'm going, I'm out. So this threat of abandonment is very, very common. That's what emotional withdrawal is.
Right, okay. Next one.
Oh,
It's a word I've heard a lot and I'm a bit familiar with.
oh, it's overused, but it's really, really important to understand it. So gaslighting, again, we're hearing it in playgrounds and boardrooms, never mind in therapy rooms. But gaslighting is when something is happening for real, and you are saying to the narcissist, I am noticing this, or I'm feeling this, or you did this. And they will say, I don't know where you've got that from, but you've got that completely wrong. That never happened, or it never happened like this. Or maybe you're the one that's a bit crazy, or you're the one that's imagined that's even happened, or actually you're completely ridiculous for even wanting that to happen. So they will completely divert you off. But the gaslighting part is the fact that they will absolutely tell you that you've got something wrong that is absolutely right. It was termed from a film back in the 1940s where they were turning down the gas lamps in the street to persuade people that they were getting it wrong about what time of day it was. So they're tampering with the facts and the truth to make you think you're going a little bit mad. It's a terrible thing to do to someone.
Right, okay. Next one. Projection.
Listen, we all do this. So projection in its purest form is the parts of us that we're not so chuffed about, that we don't like to admit we have and we hold, we will give to somebody else.
Right.
So we might say to someone, I think that you've been incredibly selfish about our Christmas plans. But the truth is, we've been quite selfish about our Christmas plans and we're quite uncomfortable knowing that. So we'll give it to you instead.
Right.
You've got a terrible temper actually you've got the terrible temper, but you can't hold that truth about yourself. So you're going to give it to somebody else, anybody else for that matter. So we basically project like a light onto other people the things that we are not able to hold of our own, that we don't like about ourselves.
Be honest. When did you last properly check in with your health? A lot of us walk around assuming we're fine, right? Without really knowing. And that uncertainty usually builds up in the background until a problem shows up. But on this show, we talk a lot about honesty and really facing what's going on, even when that's uncomfortable. And I think health can be the same. That's why I recently used Randox Health and their Everyman Health Assessment. It's designed to take all the guesswork out of your health, giving you clear insight into what's really going on inside your body. It looks at up to 150 different biomarkers. That's things like nutrition, hormones, heart, liver, and prostate health. They also offer a follow-up check 6 months later so you can track your results over time. There's no GP referrals needed, no long wait for appointments, just answers fast. You simply sign up online, visit one of their local clinics in the UK and Ireland, and your results come through to the Randox Health app within 2 hours of your sample reaching the lab. They also offer an Every Woman Health Assessment, so it can benefit all of us. If you want to stop the guessing and start taking control of your health, visit randoxhealth.com and save 20% on all health checks with the code OTM20. So what does this look like in real terms in families? How does this present itself within a family unit?
Yeah. Can I use my Russian dolls? Would that be all right?
I would love that.
At this juncture?
Yeah, love that.
So I sometimes use these in therapy for all sorts of different reasons, but I think it's quite helpful in this particular setting. So if we think about a family situation, so I'm 53 now, and we're kind of heading into, it could be birthdays, could be holidays, could be whatever it may be. And so you'd think that I would turn up as a 53-year-old to that gathering.
Yeah.
And emotionally and psychologically, we would believe that I am. But don't forget, inside us, there's lots of different ages of Kathleen. There's my 40-year-old self and my 30-year-old self and my 20 and my 15. And there's most certainly a 7-year-old self that turns up. And when I was 7, my dad left, we got made homeless and life was very difficult. So she lives with me all the time and I tuck her in my pocket all the time. And she travels in with me all the time. She comes every week. She's here today with us, for example. Yeah. When we don't know all these parts of ourselves and we've been in a family that's had a narcissistic parent, all the belief sets across all those ages within us, especially the little young children that were brought up by a narcissistic parent, if we haven't had therapy with this, don't know any different. So they're travelling into that setting all the time. So when we go home to see our parents for Christmas, for example, if we do, or we go for the summer holidays together or something like that, and the narcissistic parent is present, this one is going to become very unsettled very, very quickly.
Right.
So she might be perfectly fine to turn up. She might be married with kids. She might present as very much together. But inside, this one becomes fearful, concerned and worried because they know they're going to have to spend a few days with that narcissistic parent. And if we're not aware of and we haven't healed this one, she's going to really, really struggle. So in family systems, we've got to think about everybody that's in that family has all had an experience of that narcissistic parent who might still be ruling the roost, by the way, in that family when you finally go home. So we haven't just got our lived experiences as an adult, we've got all of our lived experiences through the ages that we were with that parent, even if we've kind of escaped their everyday clutches. And they will all still become apparent unless we've gone back and listened to their stories and heard them. So there's something about understanding what the little ones in us feel about these situations and making sure we've gone and listened to that story and we've healed them. They were not mirrored at all.
Yeah.
So we can then mirror, we can sit and talk to them on a daily basis and say, how are you feeling today? How are you doing today? What do you need today? So every morning I will think about all the little internalised Kathleens and I will ask them as I get up in the morning, does anybody need anything today? The worried one, the mischievous one, the naughty one, the ambitious one, they've all got something to say sometimes. So we've got to get involved. But if you've had a narcissistic parent, for sure, what I find is that the adults that come to me in therapy will come with, and we need to sit with this one because these ones have had a very disturbing upbringing that they need to resolve.
Yeah.
And the problem is they're not going to resolve it often with that parent. Other things that happen in our childhood is we might be able to go to our parent now and talk it out and work it out in family therapy. If you've got a narcissist that cannot be cured, you're never going to get the validation, the apology, the recognition of what happened. So you've got to do, it's got to be an inside job to recover from a narcissistic parent in a family setting. So another technique that we would use once we've looked at this inner child part is how do we help this part begin to start to tell their truth? So we talked about adapted self, false self.
Yeah.
So often when people come and they're beginning to come to terms with what's happened about a narcissistic parent, they're beginning to touch in on what really happened to them and what it was really like for them and how they might really feel about this parent.
Yeah.
But they find it very difficult to even imagine that they would ever tell that parent how they really felt. And sometimes in our healing, part of the journey is to begin to find the words to express what we really felt, even if we don't think an apology would ever come, which it's unlikely it ever would. So what would we do? So often I will talk to this part in the room and we will really get to know this child that was very frightened of or confused by or overwhelmed by this narcissistic parent.
Yeah.
And then once I feel that they're ready, I will invite my clients to invite in their imagination, let's say their narcissistic father, to come in the room and sit in the chair. And we'll put them in a chair opposite them. And very, very slowly, I'll ask them to describe what they're wearing, what they sound like, what the expression on their face is like. And even in the imagination, I can often see the client beginning to really feel what they feel from this parent. And it can be really heartbreaking, but the work is important if we do it slowly and carefully enough. And as the weeks go on, again, it's a Gestalt technique, and it's called the empty chair technique, if anyone wants to look it up. We begin to allow this, the person that we're working with, to begin to talk to that parent and say, when you did these things, this is what it was like for me. Or you should never have made me feel like I was your partner. Or you should never have shared with me all of the worries you had about finances because I became a parentified child. I became a child that grew up too quickly because you made me worry about things that I wasn't even old enough to understand, age 8, 9, 10, for example. Could also be if you had a very critical parent, you've never felt that you could actually say, do you know what, you terrorised me as a child, or you made me feel so frightened as a child, or I never felt I could stand up to you and I'm going to stand up to you now and I'm going to tell you what I really think about you. And we often say that, anger is a great emotion in therapy because normally under anger is actually sadness or fear, and we know that. But getting someone's fire up when they've actually been really squashed as a child is really important. So empty chair is really important because if you imagine that parent sitting there and what would you really like to say to them? And sometimes when they're really struggling with it, I can even say a few things to that parent as a therapist for them to get them going. So even at home, your viewers, your listeners can do this at home. You can put a cushion down on that sofa when no one's in and have the conversation that you've never felt you can have, or maybe you might never actually be able to have, but it's important that your own psyche can hear you finally say it.
Yeah. I mean, that would be transformative.
It really is.
I can imagine.
It's magical work.
Let's talk a little bit about the hopeful bit, right?
Yes.
Because your book and your work isn't just about understanding the wound, it's about breaking the cycle, which is what's so interesting.
I believe we might only have one life on this planet. I'd love to believe our soul might regenerate, but I think we might only be on this planet once. And my view is that we can be the only ones that are responsible for our life, and we must direct that the best way we can. And therefore, we have to live the life that we choose and want to live, regardless of what's happened to us in the background. So yes, of course, we can go and heal the wounds that have happened to us, and we should. But then what are we going to do with that space and that time? And who are we going to allow into our lives? And who is it time to gently move out? And I think everybody has their own private journey on how they might do that. Some people might cut off from parents. Some people choose not to. I'm no judge of any of that. But it's deciding who gets to be in our life is really important. And what do we value and who do we value? And I think there's lots of things we have to start with. And the first thing I would say to people is you've got to accept what actually has happened to you. Yeah. Many people say, I don't know if my parent is narcissistic or not, I'm not sure. Well, read up and study. And if you think they are, come to terms with the fact that actually maybe I did. Maybe they actually are. And I have to learn to accept that. It could be the same if they were a violent parent. It could be the same if they were an addict parent, whatever it may be. But accept what is. Because once you've accepted, you can begin on compassion. You can start working on what was that like for you And what was it really like for you? And therefore, where are the wounds and what do we need to heal? We can begin to find compassion. Because once we've done those 2 steps, we can then begin to decide, and what do I want the future to be like?
Yeah.
We cannot stay an eternal victim. We all had stuff happen to us. I've had too. But it doesn't excuse us to stay in that victim state the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
We can get up and we can decide, okay, now I've done the compassion and acceptance, and we must do that bit first. I can start to design what my life should have always looked like, and how do I get there, and what do I want to become?
Yeah.
The way I describe it always is, if you have a cut on your knee and you've got, grit and dirt in it, you've got to go and clean it out very carefully. And that's what the compassion and the acceptance is before you put the TCP on it and a plaster.
Yeah,
if you shove a plaster on it, it's going to get infected. You haven't done the work. You've got to go and do the work.
Yeah.
And there's too many people, I think, that do what we call spiritual bypass. They'll go off to all these fandangled retreats and all sorts of wonderful things. But actually, have they done the difficult work, which is sitting with the difficult parts of ourselves that we're slightly hiding or projecting? Once we've cleaned that out and we've put the plaster on, then we can sit from the beginning and think, so now, what do I want to become in my life? And I think that's the most beautiful work, which is beginning to find we're back to then true self. So when we think about false and adapted self from earlier on, Donald Winnicott's work, how do we come back to true self? What do I really think? Who am I? Who was I always meant to be? But I just got a bit of a waylaid, funny way around it because of what happened to me as a kid. So what do I really know about that? How can I tune into myself truly? And maybe I trained to be a lawyer because that's what I was told I was meant to be in the family. But actually, I'm a creative. I've always wanted to be a musician, for example. So, well, how about we start with that? How about we start that you join a choir or you learn the guitar or you begin to touch in on the thing that actually secretly you've always known you wanted to be. I wanted to be a dentist my whole life. And I was persuaded to do something else. I went into the media industry and I loved it. But I've come back to sort of the medical world, I think, because I always knew deep down. So getting it back in touch with our true self is one of the most pleasurable things we could ever do.
Yeah.
But we've got to come back to what do I really think and what do I really believe? And for doing that, we've got to take off the layers of the false and adapted. We've got to really find our true voice. And it's beautiful work. Bit of it's inner child, bit of it's internal family systems work, all sorts of stuff, but also having others reflect back to you what they really see in you.
That's so good to hear. I mean, from my experience, it's been the peace that I was searching for was always in the work that I was avoiding.
Yeah.
It was like, it was everywhere. I didn't ever want to go, oh no, don't go there. It was like, oh, that leads to some kind of lightness. It was like always, every single time.
Yeah.
And even if I was pointed towards it, I'd be very resilient. I'd be very like, no, I don't want to go there. It's not that. It's this.
Yeah.
It's fucking that.
Yeah.
And
sometimes it is about timing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Sometimes we've got to be ready for that work.
Yeah, yeah.
And as a therapist, sometimes I can kind of see where I need to go with them. But if I went there too quickly with them, it would be too much.
Yeah.
We have these defenses because we need them. So slowly we have to get to the point where we can start to slightly dissolve the defense and then we're ready to come to the next phase. And that's the carefulness in the work that we do. But how sad would it be for us to get to the end of our life and never having done that work?
Absolutely.
I would see that as a waste of a life.
Yeah.
But we've got to find some courage and good practitioners and group work. I think group work's also beautiful. Group work in narcissistic recovery is magic. When you're with someone that actually understands what happened, there's a shorthand that you don't have to try and explain to everybody. And I found when I was recovering from a narcissistic partner, when I found other people that really got it, suddenly I was able to talk about it more freely because they really got it. And as you'll know, being got is one of the most gorgeous feelings in the world, because not being got is the most painful. So actually with narcissism, because the language is quite specific and their behaviours are quite bizarre, when you're with someone that really gets it in group work, it goes much faster. So I always encourage people to try and find some groups or other people that really get it.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak the same for recovery. Like it's being around other people in recovery has been the most beneficial work I've done.
Yeah.
It's just
but initially people think group work, oh my God, I'd rather be sick in my own shoes.
Yeah.
But actually when you're in it, you realise.
How does someone start setting boundaries without drowning in guilt?
So just start easy, start slow, start with something that just feels manageable in some form.
Yeah.
So if it is that you still feel that you have to go and see your narcissistic parent on a Saturday afternoon, go for an hour and leave. Don't
Yeah.
stay for the whole afternoon and get berated by them. So little things, but little and often to start with. Get that muscle beginning to work. It's like going to the gym for the first time. It's really painful. But what happens is when you energetically decide, I'm going to start to put some boundaries in, they will feel it. They will feel that something's going on with you, and they might try and tussle you. So you've got to start easy so you can hold that boundary.
Yeah.
Long phone calls. And there's got to be it's been wonderful chatting, Mum, Dad, but it's time to go now. I've got to go and pick up so-and-so from ballet or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Even if they're sitting watching, the TV eating popcorn. There's something about small, easy boundaries, and then begin to turn that dial up on what happens. So first thing to me is about time and access boundary. Mm-hmm. The second is what gets said to you that's not okay. What do you begin to do on the verbal challenging, which is, it's not okay for you to speak to me in that way, or if you're going to continue to speak to me in that way, I'm gonna go, and we'll speak to you tomorrow, but I'm going to leave for now. I'm going to end this call now. So access to you from time. Then the verbal boundary starts to come in, really, really important. And the third layer, of course, is then action. So you've got something that you can do with the way that you will allow them to treat you at the same time. So we've got the three different layers, but I think access to time to start with is the easiest way to begin. And you can just practice it without needing to do too much. So you could tail visits, you could tail phone calls. You find ways to just do little and often contact if that's what you've got to do with them in some form.
Yeah.
But let them begin to feel that you are beginning to get into charge of this relationship, because you've got to be in charge of the relationship to survive it well.
In your opinion, can you heal a relationship with a narcissistic parent? Or does healing sometimes mean stepping back fully?
So I think you can heal your own internalized relationship with your parent. I don't think you can heal the relationship with them, because the relationship needs two people seeking to heal it. It's the same in marriages and partnerships. If both of you want to heal it, you've got a really good chance that you will. But if only one of you does, you can't do it with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah.
So if we're dealing with a full-blown disordered narcissist, A, they won't accept that they are, B, they're not interested in changing, C, they're not curable. So unfortunately, no. What you have to do is change the way you view that relationship. Lower your expectations, accept what they are, and accept maybe what you are able to receive from them. Maybe there's lots of things they do that are absolutely awful and dreadful and terrible, but they're really good at growing lavender, and they'll give you a lavender pot for your birthday every year. Yeah. Accept it. Take it.
Take that one thing.
That's one thing. I'll take that from them. They haven't got to be all pervasive, terrible and awful. So if there is something, find a way to receive it. But it's about you readjusting your expectation of that relationship with them and accepting what you're actually dealing with.
Yeah.
One exception, if we're dealing with a malignant narcissist, if what they're doing with you is literally causing you sleepless nights, is really just derailing your life in some way and affecting your relationships, I would go further. I would say low contact would be very, very good idea, and no contact sometimes. And I have no judgment on it. In the book, I talk about when they get sick, when they die. There's all sorts of things that come along later in life with parents. My view is only you will know what it is that you need. But actually, the protection of your peace and the protection of your progress is the most important thing, because you're someone else's partner, you're someone else's parent. You need to be well and happy to function in your life. You're not there to serve their egotistical difficulties with their disorder. Nobody, I say this, no one ever voluntarily makes themselves an orphan. No one would ever choose to do that unless something's really bad. But if it is, and you or a loved one does that, be sure to know that they've probably gone through something that is almost unspeakably bad. So trust that they're doing what they need to do, or that you are doing what you need to do.
Absolutely. We often hear phrases like, you only get one mum and dad.
All the time.
And I hear these phrases a lot, right? Because they're spouted around. But those messages can trap people in kind of lifelong harm. How do you help someone navigate the grief or the guilt or shame that can follow no contact?
It comes because people make comments like that, no blood's thick in the water, all those types of things. But actually what's interesting is if your parent had beaten you to a pulp physically, if your parent had sexually abused you, we wouldn't dream of saying that to you. So we need to start to understand that psychological abuse, emotional abuse is just as damaging to our psyche and to us as individuals as those other forms of abuse. To me, it's the final frontier. It is the third and final frontier. If we begin to understand that, I think we'll begin to give people more latitude. None of us want to not have a parent. They're such a critical part of our lives. And if we've got great ones, then we've absolutely landed the lottery. And hopefully we've got all right ones. But if we do have abusive ones, then no one will ever understand as much as we do if we're sitting in that position. But let's begin to educate ourselves about the fact that this happens to people and that people don't tend to cut off unless something really awful has happened. So instead it's to say, that sounds incredibly difficult, and if you ever want to talk about it, I am here, rather than jumping in with you've only got one parent.
Kathleen, thank you so much. I mean, I can't thank you enough. That was one of my favourite chats we've ever had.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing all of your work that you do. This is out now. My Parent the Peacock.
It is.
And this would be a really good read for anyone that's going through this, right?
It really is. It's in thirds of, really factual, what is it? Because there's so much nonsense about narcissism out there. So first third, exactly what it is with science and research. Middle third, what does it look like in real life? So you might be able to relate to it if you think you're going through it. But the final important third is, how do you recover? Lots of techniques, lots of things you can practice at home, lots of things you can do with your own therapist to say there is hope, and you can get through it, and you can get over it, and you can recover.
Amazing. Guys, check it out. I really, really, really admire everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so, so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Now, to everyone who's listening, I'm sure you don't need to have grown up with a narcissistic parent to relate to this conversation. Most of us have carried emotional burdens we didn't have words for until much later in life. Let us know which part of Kathleen's story resonated in the comments. Please, I love reading the comments. I love hearing from you guys. I find it so amazing, and I really do appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. As always, if you or someone you know is struggling, you're not alone. We've listed some very helpful resources in the show notes. We'll see you next week. Thanks very much.